You think you know the story of the 1964 Pontiac GTO, the car that kicked off the muscle car era, the one that made every young driver in America dream of power, speed, and rebellion. But what if I told you the GTO was never supposed to exist? That behind its creation was a secret Saturday morning conspiracy, a corporate deception that tricked General Motors itself, and a name stolen straight from Ferrari? Stick with me, because today we're uncovering the untold stories of the 1964 Pontiac GTO, stories of rebellion, brilliance, and rule-bending that made this car not just a legend, but a revolution. And hey, before we fire up that 389 V8 and dive in, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because just like the GTO, we're only getting started, and you won't want to miss what's coming next. The Saturday morning. Conspiracy: The Secret Laboratory. Picture this. It's the early 1960s, Milford Proving Grounds in Michigan. Most GM executives are enjoying their weekends, but three men aren't. They're rebels. Misfits, dreamers, John DeLorean, Pontiac's young chief engineer, Bill Collins, a brilliant engineer with grease on his hands and ideas in his head, and Russ G., the quiet genius behind Pontiac's engines. Every Saturday morning, the three would gather for what they called their what-if sessions. What if we ignored the rules? What if we built the car that we wanted to drive? One morning, Collins looked at the Pontiac Tempest sitting there in the garage and said the words that would change history. It would take about 20 minutes to stick a 389 in here. DeLorean leaned back, thought for a moment, and gave the green light. Let's try it. That was it. No corporate approval, no official project. Just three rebels in a garage. They ripped out the Tempest's modest motor, dropped in the big 389 cubic inch V8, and created something completely illegal by GM's own standards. Then came the test drive. DeLorean himself behind the wheel, slamming the throttle, that new engine growling like nothing else. The car was so intoxicating that test drivers had to fight each other just for a turn. Can you imagine being there, sitting in that stripped-down, Tempest-turned monster for the first time? Would you have dared to take it on the track, knowing it technically shouldn't exist? And this was only the beginning. Because little did they know, the real challenge wasn't building the GTO. It was keeping it alive long enough to fool the biggest corporation in America. The great GM deception: breaking rules. Without breaking rules. Here's the problem. General Motors had a strict corporate policy. No intermediate car could have an engine larger than 330 cubic inches. Period. Pontiac's 389? Way over the limit. The GTO should have been dead on arrival. But DeLorean, Collins, and G weren't just engineers. They were chess players. They realized something sneaky. The 330 cubic inch rule only applied to base engines, not optional ones. So what did they do? They reclassified the GTO as just that, an option package for the Tempest. On paper, it looked harmless, just a trim line. But in reality, it was a wolf in sheep's clothing. Sales manager Frank Bridge didn't think it would work. He predicted maybe 5,000 buyers in the first year. After all, who would pay extra for a Tempest with a big engine? But by the end of 1964, over 32,000 GTOs were sold. The gamble had paid off, and the car had started a fire that would spread across Detroit. Think about it. GM executives had no idea they'd just been outsmarted by their own employees. DeLorean had managed to bend the rules without technically breaking them. And when the sales numbers came in, the GTO wasn't just a success. It was a phenomenon. So, what do you think? Was this genius or corporate betrayal? Stick around, because the story gets even bolder. Next up, we'll uncover how the GTO almost got a very different name, and how John DeLorean dared to steal a badge straight from Ferrari. The name that nearly wasn't, from Super Tempest to GTO. Now here's something you probably didn't know. The GTO almost wasn't called the GTO at all. When Pontiac first cooked up this rule-breaking Tempest package, some execs wanted to call it the Super Tempest. Catchy? Maybe. Legendary? Not even close. But John DeLorean had bigger ideas. He wanted a name that didn't just sound fast. It had to carry weight, prestige, something that whispered European racing heritage while shouting American muscle. So where did he look? Ferrari. That's right. DeLorean borrowed 3 sacred letters from Enzo Ferrari's crown jewel, the 250 GTO, Gran Turismo Omologato, a homologation term meaning the car was approved for international racing. Now think about this. In 1964, Ferrari's GTO was dominating tracks in Europe. It was rare, exotic, and staggeringly expensive. And Pontiac? A Detroit division known for building family cars. Can you imagine the audacity? DeLorean essentially swiped the badge of Europe's most prestigious sports car and slapped it on an American street bruiser. The best part? Pontiac actually managed to get it homologated for certain racing classes in Europe. Yes, a Pontiac. GTO was technically legal in the same arenas as Ferrari. That name turned what could have been just another trim package into an instant icon. Because when a teenager in 1964 walked into a Pontiac dealership, they weren't buying a Super Tempest. They were buying the GTO, a car that felt like Ferrari but priced like Pontiac. Let me ask you, if you were a young buyer back then, would you have cared about the Ferrari connection? Or would you have just been thrilled to burn rubber, with 389 cubic inches under the hood? And speaking of rebels, the man who made this all possible was no ordinary GM executive. Up next, we'll dive into the wild life of John DeLorean, Detroit's youngest division chief, and a man who lived like a rock star while rewriting car history. The youngest rebel in Detroit, John DeLorean, the 40-year-old revolutionary. By the time the GTO launched, John DeLorean was just 40 years old, and he was already the youngest division head in General Motors. That alone broke tradition. GM was a place of gray suits and quiet obedience. But DeLorean? He was flashy, charismatic. He wore Italian suits, sported thick sideburns, dated movie stars, and rolled into meetings with a confidence that felt more Hollywood than Detroit. To the old guard at GM, he was a problem. But to the younger generation, he was electric. DeLorean understood something most executives didn't, that America's youth wanted power, freedom, and style in their cars. He wasn't building sedans for families. He was building excitement. And long before Pontiac's official slogan became, "We build excitement," DeLorean was already living it. He had a sharp engineering mind, but also a marketer's instinct. He knew speed alone wouldn't sell. It had to be wrapped in image, attitude, and a little bit of danger. The GTO wasn't just horsepower, it was rebellion you could buy. And here's the twist. This was only one chapter in his wild career, because after Pontiac, DeLorean went on to start his own company. And in the 1980s, he built another car you might have heard of, a stainless steel sports car with gull-wing doors that became a literal time machine in Hollywood. Yes, the man who gave us the GTO also gave us the DeLorean DMC-12 from Back to the Future. So tell me, when you think of John DeLorean, do you picture the muscle car revolutionary or the dreamer who built the most famous movie car in history? Coming up, we leave the executive offices and head straight to the streets, because while Pontiac engineered the GTO, one dealership turned it into legend. The place? Royal Pontiac. And their tricks? Oh, they made stock GTOs even faster. The Royal treatment, Royal Pontiac, where legends were born. Now, here's where the story shifts from corporate offices to the streets. Because while Pontiac was busy building the GTO, one dealership in Michigan was busy turning it into something even bigger, a legend. That dealership was Royal Pontiac in Royal Oak, Michigan. And it wasn't just another car lot. Thanks to Jim Wangers, Pontiac's marketing mastermind, and Ace Wilson Jr., the owner of Royal Pontiac, it became the performance headquarters of the entire muscle car era. Royale wasn't about just selling cars. They educated their salespeople. Imagine walking into a dealership in 1964, and the guy behind the counter not only knew the specs, but could also tell you which carburetor jetting would give you a tenth of a second quicker in the quarter mile. And then came the secret weapon. The Royal Bobcat. This wasn't a factory package. It was a dealership upgrade kit. New carburetor jets, different distributor settings, and sometimes even higher compression heads, all tuned to squeeze every ounce of power out of that 389A. Royal Bobcat GTO wasn't just a car. It was a street brawler disguised as a showroom model. And if you knew the right people, you could order it straight from the dealer, tuned, tested, and ready to blow the doors off Corvettes at the next stoplight. Royal Pontiac even backed. Its cars in drag racing, winning big in NHRA Superstock, and cementing Pontiac's image as the performance king. But maybe the most legendary story came from the streets. Jim Wangers himself loved to do a little, let's say, unofficial marketing. He'd line up his GTO against a Corvette, let the Chevy driver win the first race, then swap cars with his buddy. The next round, the same GTO would suddenly destroy the Corvette, because it wasn't the same at all. It was a fully tuned Bobcat. Word spread fast. And just like that, Pontiac wasn't just selling cars, they were selling bragging rights. So let me ask you, if you were around back then, would you have paid a little extra for a Royal Bobcat upgrade? Or would you have rolled the dice and kept your GTO stock? Up next, Pontiac faced its biggest challenger yet, the Plymouth Road Runner. And Pontiac's answer wasn't just another GTO. It came with a crazy name, wild colors, and one of the boldest marketing campaigns in muscle car history. Here comes the judge. The judge arrives. Here comes Da Judge. By the late 1960s, Pontiac had a problem. The GTO was still hot, but Plymouth had just released the Road Runner, a stripped-down, affordable muscle car that was flying off the lots. Pontiac needed an answer. And fast. Their solution. A car so outrageous it couldn't be ignored. The GTO Judge. Now, where did that name come from? Believe it or not, from a comedy sketch. The hit TV show Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In had a recurring gag where one of the characters would shout, "Here comes the judge!" It became a national catchphrase. Pontiac, always tuned into pop culture, grabbed it and ran. The judge wasn't subtle. Bright carousel red paint, bold side stripes, rear spoilers, and Ram air engines that screamed performance. Under the hood, you could get the Ram Air 3 with 366 horsepower or the legendary Ram Air 4 with 370. This wasn't just a car. It was Pontiac doubling down on the muscle car attitude. Louder, faster, and in your face. Production numbers? Limited. In 1969, Pontiac built just 6,833 Judges. And if you want to talk rare, the Judge Ram Air 4 convertible, only 5 were ever made. Today, those are million-dollar machines. But here's the kicker. The Judge wasn't just about power. It was marketing genius. Bright paint, wild ads, and tie-ins with rock bands like Paul Revere and the Raiders made the Judge a pop culture icon as much as a muscle car. So tell me, if you had to choose in 1969, would you have gone with the clean, classic GTO? Or would you have rolled out of the dealership in a wild Judge, letting the world know you were ready to race and be seen? Don't go anywhere, because if you think 5 Judge convertibles were rare, wait until you hear about the Holy Grail GTOs. These are the cars so scarce that only a handful were ever built. And today, they fetch prices that'll make your jaw drop. The rarest of the rare. Holy Grail GTOs. If you think the Judge convertibles were rare, hold on. Because now, we're talking about the true unicorns of the GTO world. Let's start with the 1971 Judge convertible. Pontiac built only 17 of them. 17! That's fewer cars than most dealerships sold in a single afternoon during the GTO's peak. Then there's the tropical lime mystery. Out of those 17 convertibles, only 2 were painted in this wild green shade. Try finding one today. Collectors would fight tooth and nail just to get a look at it. But the rarest of them all? The 1972 GTO Post-Coupe 455 HO, Pontiac-built, wait for it, only 3. That's right, just 3 of those cars exist in the entire world. Even among more common convertibles, numbers stayed low. Pontiac never built many drop-tops, making each surviving example a crown jewel today, and when these unicorns hit auction, prices soar into the stratosphere. We're talking hundreds of thousands, sometimes over $1 million, depending on the rarity and condition. Think about it. A car that started as a loophole option package is now commanding the kind of money once reserved for European exotics. That's how powerful the GTO legend became. So let me throw this out to you. If money were no object, which one would you rather have in your garage? A bright orange Judge? A tropical lime convertible? Or that ultra-rare 72 Post-Coupe, knowing you owned one of only 3? And it wasn't just the cars themselves that made the GTO unforgettable. Pontiac's marketing machine cranked out some of the boldest, wildest campaigns Detroit had ever seen. And they made sure America knew the Tiger had arrived. Marketing magic, Tiger power, and wide-track Pontiac didn't just build the GTO, they sold it with attitude. And their advertising? It was just as bold as the car itself. One of the most famous campaigns was the Tiger theme. Pontiac pitched the GTO as having tiger power, complete with TV spots, posters, and even stuffed tiger mascots you could get from the dealer. It wasn't just about selling a car. It was about selling a lifestyle of raw animalistic power. And then there was wide track. Pontiac had introduced the idea back in 1959. Cars with a wider stance, giving them a more aggressive look and better handling. By the time the GTO rolled around, wide-track styling had become Pontiac's calling card. The ads practically dared you to drive something else. But maybe the most unforgettable moment came in 1969, when Pontiac tied the GTO Judge to pop culture. They cut a deal with the rock band Paul Revere and the Raiders to appear in commercials, complete with music, wild editing, and psychedelic vibes. Some say it was one of the very first true music videos. The GTO wasn't just in the showroom. It was on TV, in magazines, in songs. It was a cultural event. And it told every young American that driving a Pontiac wasn't just about transportation. It was about identity. So let me ask you, do you remember those ads? Did you ever see the stuffed tiger? Or maybe even sit in a showroom surrounded by Tiger Power posters? And as bold as those ads were, the impact of the GTO went far beyond marketing, because what started in 1964 sparked an arms race and changed Detroit forever. The legacy lives on. By the time the dust settled, the Pontiac GTO had done more than just sell cars. It had sparked an all-out war. Chevy had the Chevelle SS. Ford brought out the Mustang Mach 1. Dodge unleashed the Charger and Challenger. The muscle car era, that golden age of Detroit horsepower, all traces back to one rebellious project in 1964. And the man behind it? John DeLorean, the maverick who bent the rules, tricked GM, and built excitement when no one else dared. Even today, collectors chase GTOs with the same passion kids once felt walking into Pontiac dealerships in the 60s. Every rare Judge, every tropical lime convertible, every Bobcat-tuned street racer carries the weight of a revolution. Because the 1964 GTO wasn't just a car. It was proof that sometimes the best way to change the world is to bend the rules just enough to make magic happen. So, what do you think? Was the GTO the greatest muscle car of all time? Or was it simply the one that lit the fuse for everything? That came after? If you enjoyed this journey through Pontiac history, make sure you hit subscribe, because we've got more stories coming. The kind of stories that keep classic car legends alive.